So you guys really make me feel good. And if you want to buy me drinks later, that's cool too. Really? Awesome. Really?
But
Really?
we started talking about Siberia. Wow.
I threw you under the bus. It wasn't. It was. I was. So you came just to see this clinic. That's awesome. Thank you very much. And even when I first got my record deal, it was intimidating because at the time, it was really when I was working on my own band. I have a rock band. I had a rock band back then with my brother as a singer, right? Oh, that's right. Years ago. That's right. And so right out of high school, we had this rock band, and that's really what I wanted to do. It's very strange to, even to this day, to be considered by many this guitar instrumental fusion guy when that kind of happened almost by mistake or inadvertently. It wasn't what I set forth to do. And it's still strange that people like hearing it because it's like, I don't know what I'm doing that's so great. But when I got my deal, we had sent a bunch of demos to a lot of record labels in the hopes of getting a deal. And at that time, there was a guitar player connoisseur by the name of Mike Varney, who had a column in Guitar Player magazine called Spotlight. And every month he would feature 3 guys from around the world that were unknown. And if he felt they were cool, he would feature them in the magazine. If he really liked them, he would sometimes offer a record deal on his independent label. So I wasn't really even interested in anything other than the fact that he was a record label, and it was just another place to send our demo to. So I sent a demo to him, and I had put 2 or 3 songs with our band stuff that was just me kind of blowing over chord changes. They weren't really songs, they were just, there was like an Al Jarreau thing on there, and there was some sort of, it was actually not very rock at all. And the one thing I did do that I felt kind of proud of was that in addition to the P.O. box that he had suggested recommended that you send it, the demo to, I thought, I'll do that, but I'm also going to send the demo to, I'm also going to send it FedEx to Guitar Player magazine, because somebody will have to physically get it, and someone will have to sign it, and someone will have to hand it to someone. Someone will have to have this in their hand. So that's what I did, and I FedExed it overnight, and it really worked, because I got a phone call the very next day from the label saying, I'd like you playing, and would you be interested in a record deal? And I was like, record deal? Yeah, we've been trying to get one for 2 years, of course. But what I wasn't ready for was the request to do an instrumental album, because I'd never even thought about writing an instrumental song in my entire life. It never even occurred to me to write an instrumental song. So it was like, wow. Normally in the past, before that, it was like I come up with a riff, I come up with chord changes, I hand it to my brother, he takes it with him and comes up with melody lines, and my work is done. But suddenly now I had to become sort of lyrical as a guitarist and start thinking about melody lines and phrasing. And it was strange. And it was so strange that it made me realize that most of what I write, in fact, all of what I write here. I don't write on the guitar. And that has its good points and it's got its bad points, but when I write music, it's never when a guitar is in my hand. And people ask a lot about that, because I'm doing webcam lessons now, and there's a lot of great advanced students out there, so a lot of times they're interested in things like composition, and they'll say, what's the best approach to writing? And it's never about scales, it's never about music theory, it's never about any of that. It's just about walking down the street and hearing something. It's usually after listening to songs in the key of life all day, and then suddenly I'm hearing stuff, or listening to a Sting album or Beatles, and then I'll just hear things, and then I'll have to go to the guitar and figure out whether or not I can play it, or figure out how to play it. And the best stuff I've ever written, or at least the stuff I feel best about, is the stuff that was always written that way. I don't write on the guitar because if I have the neck in front of me, it feels like my creative process is confined to the limitations of the fretboard, of my fretboard knowledge. So that's what I do, and that's what I did then. And the problem was, the very first song I ever wrote was a song that I actually couldn't play, and it was a pretty troubling stressful and disturbing situation because I heard this chord progression that was, in the chorus at least, it was basically like pretty easy. So it was basically that. So it was, right? And then there was this part that I was hearing that was triplets, sort of a sequenced arpeggio triplet descending thing that was outlining the chords. Like, you know. So when I went to do it, I'm like, shit, I can't do it. I still can't do it. And so I remember at one point thinking, how am I going to do this? This sucks. I just wrote a song that I can't play. Maybe I should hire a guitar player. And at one point, I specifically remember staring at my speaker cabinet thinking, there's got to be a way that this series of notes can come through these speakers. There's got to be a way to do it. Luckily, at that point in my development, I had spent a lot of time with a lot of Van Halen stuff and a lot of the sort of post-Van Halen-esque stuff. The thing is, even at that point, which was '88, most of the Van Halen-esque tapping was already pretty tired and old. So most of the stuff that came subsequent to him was based on leading tapping with the right hand, or if you're left-handed, with the picking hand. So most stuff was all some version of, that sound, some variation of that type of thing, where it was always a dead giveaway that it was tapping. But because I had spent a lot of time with it, I started playing around with the idea of what would happen if I tap with this hand first, or hammer with this hand first. Maybe I can come up with sequences. And it really worked because I saw that I could play like an arpeggio shape, like a triad, and then tap an inversion of that same thing. And it really saved me and gave me a method by which I could finally play this song. Because and it was a real simple sequence that I sort of discovered. It was just hammer, tap, and then pull. So it was, when I discovered it, I was like, whoa, I think I can, wait, let me try to do this now. So then, and then I started playing around with the actual notes. And I was really excited about it. And it was a really good example of where, what I had said earlier, a lot of my technique and a lot of my style is probably as much the result of my limitations as it is whatever strengths there are. So sometimes I'll say to people, embrace your limitations, because they could lead to things that, there may be such a thing as being too good, because if you can do everything, it may not push you to be unique or to be innovative or to find some new thing. So sometimes not having it all together is a benefit to creativity. And some of my favorite players in the world are people who don't really do everything. They just are really good at sounding like them. In fact, all my favorite players, same with actors. I see actors sometimes who are amazing and can do anything. But my favorite actors are people who, you can't get that across the street. I mean, you watch Christopher Walken, no one is like that. Whether he's the best or not, doesn't matter. It's just that you can't get that anywhere else. And there are a lot of actors like that. So, and it's the same way that I feel about guitar players. I mean, nobody sounds like Pat Metheny, nobody sounds like Van Halen, nobody sounds like Hendrix, nobody sounds like Alan Holdsworth, nobody sounds like these people. And that to me is the beauty of artistry, because that's the whole point. So it used to bother me that there were things that I couldn't do conventionally, and I practiced and I just can't do this. But now I don't worry about it, because I just say to myself, not being able to do it, I'm not interested in being the best. I'm not interested in being the best guitar player in the world. I'm just being interested in being the biggest version of Greg Howe that I can be, and just sound like myself. And the biggest compliment I ever get is
line 9,
lessons, not line 9. He knew it was coming. No, when people say, I heard you amongst a bunch of guitar players, you played 3 notes and I knew it was you. To me, that's the biggest, that's what touches me more than anything. So I always encourage a lot of my students. I know I say all the things that most sort of people in instructional positions don't say. one of which is, embrace your weaknesses. And sometimes my students just look at me like, what? Embrace my weaknesses. What does that mean? But it really just means that. It just means get excited about the fact that it might just mean that a door is about to open into some territory that wouldn't have opened had you not been limited. So, in the spirit of going back and winding back the clock for that time, I will play that song. The song is called "Kick It All Over." It's literally the very first song I ever wrote, and it's an instrumental song, and the first song on my first album. So, here it is. It's really cool. I got to.
Garage, line one. GC Garage, line one.
This is actually fun. I like this. I'm not even kidding. This is kind of fun. So I had like I said earlier, I've been really fortunate. Had an opportunity to do all kinds of things. Some things that a lot of people have gotten a chance to do, but I have had a couple of experiences that nobody has ever had that I'm gonna brag about. I got to play with Michael Jackson. So there.
Yeah.
And it was the most amazing and simultaneously terrifying experience of my entire life. And it was really good for me because one of the things being on this clinic tour and being in this situation, I don't mean to, I didn't mean Russia. I didn't even have a clinic in Russia, so I take it back. But being in situations where you're in these weird places, you get off an airplane and they rush you right to the music store, and it's a tiny little mom and pop store, and everyone's in there, and it's freezing cold, and there's no time for sound check, there's no time for this, and all. You're always in these situations a lot of times when it's not conducive at all to a great performance. And this is one of the things that is really important for musicians, up and coming, particularly younger musicians, to understand is that, yeah, you can be great in your bedroom with your equipment, your pedals, your amp, and everything's just right, you're warmed up, and everything's just right, and you sound great. But unfortunately, that's just not realistic in the real world of performance. You're almost always going to be up against some challenge that just makes it very difficult for you to be in your comfort zone. So you have to learn to just overcome that. So if you have some experiences that happen that are really challenging, it makes things that would have been stressful for you become much less stressful. And the Michael Jackson thing was definitely that, because I had met Jennifer Batten, who, for those of you who don't know who she is, she's an amazing guitarist, lead guitar player who had been with Michael for most of his tours, at least, after the Bad album, maybe even before that. But I'd met her at a NAMM show years ago, and we just kind of exchanged information and contacts, and I expressed my admiration for her, and she, said she dug my stuff, and she said, if I ever step off the Michael Jackson tour, you got the gig. And I'm like, whoa, yeah, no arguments here. And it's a long story, but the short version of the story is that a few years later, or a couple years later, her mother got ill, and she did have to leave. The thing was, she didn't know exactly when she was going to be leaving, so she just said, be ready for the phone call. Be ready, they're going to call you at some point. And she was kind enough to actually record one of the rehearsals with the band and have the microphone sort of next to her amp so that I knew exactly what she was playing. And there was also other things to think about, like she had this Digitech unit with all these different presets that I had to memorize. It wasn't just parts, it was like every song has 3 or 4 presets. And so for a while I was listening to it, I'm just kind of like, yeah, this is cool. But this was like 97 or 96, I think even. It was the history tour. So it was before cell phones were a big deal. So when she said sit by the phone, I was literally doing that because I didn't want to take a gig where I end up in China or Japan somewhere, and then the phone call comes in and I miss it. So I was literally turning down opportunities. People were offering things. And there was a couple of tours that I turned down because I didn't want to miss this phone call. But then weeks went by and months went by, and I started thinking, I can't just live my life, having it dictated by being at the mercy of this phone call that might happen. So eventually I just got on with my life and just said, I got to get on with it. I have to get back to doing my own thing. And I kind of stopped listening to the material for a while and just stopped listening and memorizing it. And, months went by, and that was it. Until this one night, Monday night, it was a Monday night in October, rainy Monday night, 8 o'clock. I get this frantic phone call from the music director from Michael Jackson and says, Greg, is this Greg Howe? Yeah. Jennifer's leading the tour, and we need you on a plane tomorrow morning at 6. Really? I mean, because that's a little short notice, isn't it? He's like, no, well, you got to do it. I said, when's the gig? He's like, Wednesday in Amsterdam in front of like 65,000 people. Right? So I'm like, I'm begging him on the phone. I said, Brad, his name was Brad, when's the next gig after the Wednesday? And he's like, Friday. And I said, if you can let me do the first gig Friday, I promise I'll have the whole thing. I'll totally be prepared. Nope. If you can't make this gig, you can't do the tour. That's it. So it was like, okay. So I'm leaving from Newark Airport. At the time I lived in Pennsylvania. Newark Airport's about 2 hours from where I lived. And the flight's at 6. I have to be there 2 hours before the flight, international flight. I have to leave my house at 2 to be there at 4. It's 8 o'clock. I've got 6 hours to do laundry, fold my clothes, and learn the Michael Jackson set. And it was so crazy because it was just like, Walkman, folding pants, laundry. I had to run out and get stuff at the music store, pick up the guitar, pick this up, fold underwear, iron. It was nuts. And so luckily, I get to the airport, I get to Amsterdam Tuesday afternoon, and I have a little bit of time to listen a little bit more, but not much, because a lot of it was just orientation, getting to know management, getting to know people, getting to know who to talk to. Wednesday was the day of the gig, and they wanted to do a run-through at like noon, like 12 o'clock, and the gig's at like 8, right? So they do a run-through. That's the first time that they're going to hear the new guy in the band, and they're already irritated, a lot of the band members. You have to remember, they've been on tour, they know the set, they've been out partying, they want to sleep in, and now the new guy, because of me, they have to get up at 11 o'clock, they're already, so we go through the set, we get through about 4 or 5 songs, and I'm like, I think I can do this, I can pull this off. I'm starting to feel confident, I'm starting to feel like this is cool. And after about the 5th song, the